What does it take to get beyond the damage of words? I'm Katrina Collier. Join me each week as I explore what it takes to step into a happier future. My guests are sharing their stories of when they realised that they needed help and what it took to take that first step, so that you leave inspired and maybe even start on your own path to self-love, care, compassion, and of course, happiness. So without further ado, let's hear their stories. Lynn Hanford-Day, I am so excited to speak to you today on Beyond the Damage of Words, particularly as I know what you're doing after this, which is super exciting. We'll get to that a bit later. So I just launched straight in. This whole podcast is to inspire people to take a step and get into healing. So what caused yours? How did you go from like something's wrong to I'm on my way? What happened?
What happened? How long
Is
have
there
you
a
got?
journey? Yeah, 30 minutes. They've
No.
all run over 30 minutes, but we're aiming at 30 minutes.
I've had I'd say three significant life events, but it wasn't until the final one that I started to
Yeah.
make sense of what had led to all of this. So in 1997, I ended my marriage,
Mm-hmm.
which caused me far more distress later than it did at the time. That caught up with me. In 2004, I had ovarian cancer. So I had a big health crisis and
Right.
considering my own mortality. And then in 2013, I had a breakdown and a lot of burnout. We just talk about burnout now. Looking
Yeah.
back on all of that, the thread that connects those three things that may seem unconnected when you just list them
Yeah.
goes right back to my childhood and the dreadful, dreadful relationship I had with my mother. She died in 2017. And prior to that, we had been estranged for 8 years. So I
Yeah.
kind of exited her out of my life, divorced my mother, whatever kind of language you want to use. But at the time, I just thought I
I
can't
call it
wait
stepping out of the
anymore.
I call it stepping out of the destruction path.
Yeah.
I leave them off doing their stuff, and yes, I hear
So
you
that
on that.
was the beginning of 2009. So in that run up to my kind of falling apart in 2013, I
Mm,
effectively orphaned myself from my mother. Um,
mm,
hadn't seen her, didn't want to. I was very, very angry. And I also became very aware of a lot of grief around ending my marriage. So 15 years later, I was suffering a lot about the impact of that choice, particularly on my son. So I was carrying a lot of mother guilt.
mm-hmm.
Um, so
It's funny, there
various
is no time
relationships have ended.
frame.
So it's yeah.
Yeah, but there is no time frame on all of this. It's quite interesting how people will say, "Oh, I wish I'd started earlier," or whatever. It happens when it happens, and if it took you 15 years to realize you were grieving, it took you. It's funny how we feel like, "Oh, well, it should have happened in the first 12 months," but actually, there's no time frame.
No,
It's
no, no, there
at
isn't.
least you got there.
At least I got there, and my it was my body decided. It's funny, like I had a major
Mm.
health crisis in 2004,
Hmm.
which
Little
was
universe going, "Hello, prod,
5 years
prod."
after getting divorced. And then you can look at the links between body, mind, emotion, illness that gets
Mm.
stored at a cellular level, and so on. Follow people like Louise Hay and the link between
Yes,
various illnesses or ailments, physical pain, and so on, and what it might mean
absolutely.
emotionally.
Yeah,
Uh, and
because it's
after that, I
dis-ease,
trained
isn't
as
it?
a psychotherapist as well. So I did
Yeah,
3 years on body psychotherapy. So I did a lot of work around the body.
yeah. Well, they call it dis-ease, don't they? Like, not
Mhm.
disease, like, it's so often we internalize it, and I feel like almost you were given it was like the universe gave you a nudge with that health crisis, and then it gave you another one, and then it went, "Okay, you haven't listened. Here you go, burnout."
absolutely.
So we're,
It did.
we're in
It decided for me. And, and a
yeah.
lot of people ask about work-related stress, and there's a fair amount of stuff kind of just out there.
Mm,
As burnout's getting more attention now, and it's often associated with work-related stress and overwork. But for
mm,
me, I'd say the cause of me falling apart was
mm,
deeply, deeply emotional and very much about loss, and a lot of
yeah.
things just came together, and work was my savior. I put
Mm,
myself into my job. I became my job, which wasn't healthy. I had nothing else
mask.
to live for, that kind of thing. So it
Yes.
sustained me for a long time until physically my body, as you said, just said, right, you're going to stop now.
Enough. We're gonna you have a choice here, die or fix it. Like
Yeah,
that's basically where you got to, isn't it? It's interesting you say that because we talk a lot about numbing, don't we? Like avoidance. And actually, I wonder if we use work as another, almost like alcohol, almost like drugs, as a numbing tool. Because if I can
totally,
at least succeed in that, it's,
totally.
and also I do wonder, can we really separate? And I'm no expert, believe me, in any of this. But can we really separate the burnout at work? I think so much of it happens from a lack of boundaries and a lack of self worth, and a because you wouldn't let yourself get to that point if you had those, and then that often comes from something that's happened, either a traumatic childhood or
Yes,
just
I
yeah.
completely agree. And I've always described myself as a work enthusiast. So so I've always put myself, commit to something,
Mm,
and seek to overachieve.
yeah.
Overachiever,
Mm,
perfectionist
yeah.
tendencies, wildly ambitious, not for myself in terms of career, but in terms of what I can deliver.
Mm,
The emphasis on deliver inside an organization. So I played
yeah.
into all of that,
Mm,
and was very successful in terms of, you want to measure success by career. Uh,
yes.
and at the same time, I really thank what happened in 2013, because I was
Mm,
literally stopped in my tracks, and I went on a very, very deep inner journey. And
so
it was far more scary than having, possibly a terminal illness. With
yes.
cancer, you're either going to die
Yeah.
or you aren't. And
Yes.
very lucky, I was
Yeah.
given another chance, and I'm still here. Um, but
And now you're helping
context,
others, so you
losing my mind was like, God, because I felt
so
like I was losing my mind.
so what did so you felt like you were losing your mind, but you still took a step. So what did you
Yeah,
do? What was the first thing you went, I need help this way? Or
yeah.
did you go into your art then? Like what did you do first?
No, for a while, because I had dreadful insomnia. So initially, I was caught up with denial. I wasn't ill. I kept saying to my doctor, I've got to get back to work. I've got the budget to do. This was January 2013. I'm the HR director. I have the budget to do. What about my team? So I was still caught up with that. And I'd say
Yeah.
I was in denial for about 3 months, right through till Easter time.
Wow.
I had bought a painting from an
Yeah.
artist who happened to live a few miles away, and I'd
Mm.
collected it from her before Christmas, and she'd asked if she could put me on her email list because she
Mm.
occasionally ran workshops. So I said, fine.
Wow.
And I received an email from the
Yeah.
universe, or from Fee.
Thank you, universe.
He said, I'm going to run 6 weeks of meditative art workshops in her home. And I had no idea what that was. But at the time, the kind of Headspace app was really growing in
Mm.
popularity. And I thought to myself, I need to learn to meditate. So
Yeah.
this meditative art, oh, it's
Yeah.
meditation. My counselor had said, you're not well enough to meditate. And she was right, actually, which sounds very
Oh.
counterintuitive. She said, you
Oh,
need to
my
learn to relax.
that's funny. Oh,
Yes.
I didn't take that well at all. I thought that was dreadful advice. How interesting. But
She
you
was a
say she
very
was right.
wise woman. She said, because
Oh.
meditation is actually quite an active process, really. I know it's about managing thoughts and
Mm.
so on and seeking to calm,
Yeah, you're
but
right.
it requires focus to do it. that I didn't have. And she said, "You need to learn to
Interesting.
relax." And she said, "I'll prove it to you." And she gave me a meditation CD, which I switched off after 20 minutes. I couldn't cope with
I'm
it.
impressed you got to 20 minutes though.
So I remember it's about I was being a mountain or something, and I thought, I'm not a mountain at all.
So yes, your
I'm a
ego, it was
puddle on
up
the
there, wasn't
floor.
it? Going pick, 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 pick.
I'm a puddle on the floor, and I can't sleep. So off I trot to
Actually,
this.
you're right. You're right about it being active. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it truly is, isn't it? Because it took me ages to be able to meditate. And you're right, because it is that process of actively getting inner critic, ego, whatever you like to call it, to shush so you
Yeah,
can actually be still and in the
yeah.
moment. Yeah, true. So instead, you went and did this amazing course.
I did it was in Fee's kitchen. It was lovely. There were only four of us, one of whom was a
Oh, how
mum.
beautiful.
So I was fed, herbal tea and homemade lemon drizzle cake. I remember that. And
Perfect.
I found myself drawing circles, constantly drawing circles.
And
So I
strangely, you
bought a
still
colouring
do.
book, of
Yeah.
mandalas and kaleidoscopes because I'd always enjoyed those patterns as a child, and I love
Yeah.
spirograph. So I would spend a couple of hours in the afternoon colouring in because it was the one thing that stopped the infernal chatter in my head. And it became the
Mm,
meditation.
yeah.
So
But it was
I would
also inner
start,
child play. It was
yeah.
releasing the creativity, wasn't it? It
It
was
was something
all, you
about
probably
colour.
didn't know that's what you were doing.
No, it was just something. I think it was about using my hands, something about
Mm,
colour in what
mm.
was a very black and white, bleak kind of period of time.
Time.
I loved the colour from the pencils. Um, and the main thing was it stopped the noise in my head. So it was a
Mm,
relief. And in that sense, it was healing.
yeah.
Mm. And
And it's interesting because the 10 years later, you're still very much on the circles. I mean,
oh,
anyone
yeah.
listening to the podcast can't see that there's one of your pieces of artwork right behind you. And in fact, there's one up on my wall, which has also got
Yeah.
circles in it.
Yeah. There's a
So you can
mandala.
just about see it. Yeah, I know. I love it. Absolutely love it. And obviously, I've got another piece, and I'm going to get one of your birth charts at some point. I'm going to do that.
Oh,
It's on the list. I'm running out of walls though, so balancing the I want this, but I have very few walls left. So, what else did you do? You mentioned that you did another course, and I know we've talked about the one that I can never remember the name of because it's complicated. Did any of
psychosync.
those help? Because I can imagine that it's great that you went into the meditative state, but how did it help with the self-esteem and the
Mhm.
inner voice and the
Mm. Yeah,
releasing the trauma from your
this was
mum?
in combination with a lot of therapy, and I'd had a lot of
Mm,
therapy over the preceding years,
yeah.
and I trained as a therapist as well. So, I spent 5 years training. So I've had years of therapy. Um,
Yeah.
didn't see the breakdown coming. Mhm.
No, I
But,
know. It's a bit ironic, isn't it?
yeah, it's cobbler's children. But so
Yeah. But we don't see our life lessons. This is the hardest thing. So we can often look at someone else and go, oh my gosh, look what they're about to do. But you can't see your own until you wake up and go,
exactly,
oh, there it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was seeing this lovely lady who was a mindfulness teacher who'd advised me
Yeah.
not to meditate just yet,
Yeah.
um, and revisited a lot of stuff which was to do with my mum. And at this point, 2013, I was still estranged from her. I didn't
Hmm.
want to have any contact with her. Um, and it was making sense. Well, not so much making sense, but coming to a point of acceptance
Hmm.
about the reality of the experience I'd had. She's a very narcissistic mother, very
Everybody
cruel.
is.
I know your book's about words. Yeah, words
Yeah. Well,
really
my
hurt,
mum's a narcissist as well. So, yes, words, they're the
really
ones that
hurt.
sting.
Yeah, and I was incredibly fond of my dad. She was very jealous of that.
Yes. Oh
Um,
my
so,
gosh. Same.
so she interfered with that relationship from when I was probably about 12. and spent a lot of time confiding in me inappropriately because really you're still
Mm,
a child, but she was trying to drive the
mm,
wedge between us by pointing out all his faults, and she had volcanic anger. So I lived
mm.
in fear of her, um,
Yeah.
because she would just vomit words, at my dad and at me, and he would escape.
Mm,
At the time, we lived in Cornwall, and we lived above a shop, and there was a
yeah.
cellar where his workshop was. So he would go there. He was a watchmaker, so he would go and
Mm,
do watch things, and I was left with her. So I would escape to my bedroom,
yeah.
and I couldn't make sense of it. And I spent most of my life not making sense of why I thought she
Mm.
hated me. And it's like,
Oh,
why?
this is all so familiar. Ugh.
Why am I,
Yeah.
so despicable?
Yeah.
And clearly, as a child and later as an adult, that all gets internalized and becomes a massive impact on self-worth, which I
Yeah.
sought to overcome, looking back on it all, by being a high-performing individual.
Perfectionism, all of
Yeah,
those things that we see in the workforce that lead to burnout.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I got my self-worth through work,
Mm, yeah.
and it
And
became
really, it was more a mask, wasn't it? Because it wasn't
yes.
really who you are. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so familiar. It's so
Yeah,
funny. I've known you for so long, but we don't have these kind of. We have
no.
some kind of conversations, but we're so often talking about your art, aren't we, or
Yeah, we
something
are.
like that. So, and you did the beautiful picture for Lance, who I actually talk about in the book because he was, I mean, Labrador, but he helped me so much on my journey to healing and actually finding that self love. Tapping into the inner child and all that sort of
Yes,
stuff. You've done it through your art. I did it through him. Just
yes,
that learning to play as being.
absolutely.
Oh, and obviously the work with Michelle as well.
Yeah.
So what do you
That's so important because of
how
the unconditional love that they bring.
so
You know,
how
I
did you journey? Like was it any particular technique or any method or anything that just really got you from that lacking self-worth to actually, you know
well,
what? I'm fine. I'm happy with who I am. I am who I am.
yeah,
And because the switch is so important, isn't it?
it is. I've done a lot of different things over the years. So it was, I think it was 1999, I trained in Reiki.
Mm,
A lot of people
wow,
don't
that's
know this.
early.
It was early. And
Yeah.
then I trained in spiritual healing, which is very similar to Reiki.
Brilliant.
That was in
Yeah.
2004.
Mm,
And by then, I was also doing the psychotherapy training, and a lot of it was around the body.
yeah.
And as neuroscience has shown more and more over the years since then, that trauma is held in the body. So
Oh,
I did a
yes.
lot of that, and I was fascinated with energy healing and
Mm,
the chakras and chakra
yeah.
healing. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going back over 20 years when I got caught up with all of that.
Yeah.
And I would seek those kinds of
Mm,
practitioners. Then it became more about talking therapy.
mm,
And there was one particular therapist who I saw for over 4 years who
mm.
hugely important in my own healing.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, she was also a trained arts therapist. So I've
Ah!
got memories of her using some of those techniques with me.
Yeah.
Also a Buddhist, and she
Yes.
had trained in a particular form of therapy that was based on mindfulness. So without realizing it, I was stepping towards something with her
Yeah.
as a practitioner.
I
In late,
almost feel like it's once you start the
mm,
like it's almost synchronicity, isn't it? Of
yeah,
things you talk about, the email arrived in your inbox, the art, and so on.
yeah,
You are incredibly talented. I love your art. So it's that. Well, we'll just keep placing the right people in your path, and it's up to us to notice and go. And things
yes,
do. I
yes,
had I talk about one of the past life regressions I had, and meeting this person in this life was because I just got a random email in my inbox and I actually went, I'm gonna go to that. And I don't normally. And it was like I followed that synchronicity and
yes.
yeah, so powerful.
Yeah. And
Amazing.
then following, 2013, I returned to something to do
Yeah.
with the work of Carl Jung.
Yes.
And I got very, very interested in archetypes and
Mhm.
the kind of archetypes alive in me. I've always
Yeah.
been fascinated with tarot and oracle decks. I have
Mhm.
a massive collection of them
They're
because
like
I
right
love
there.
the art.
I
Hello.
know.
Um, so I started playing with those. As
Yeah.
I started to recover, I became um, enchanted by the moon,
Mm.
La Luna.
Yes.
And I started
It's amazing.
completing lunar diaries. In 2014, I had huge
Mm.
anxiety and panic attacks. It was a year of panic
Mm.
attacks. And what I found by just completing these little lunar charts is my anxiety would peak before a full moon. The moment the full moon had passed, I was fine. And I was so relieved to discover
Mm.
that a lot of my anxiety was vibrational and energetic in response to the wider cosmos. So it was,
Yeah.
I found
And
that
so how's
remarkably
that helped?
helpful. Yeah.
So we're now 9 years on, and we've just had a massive
Massive
supermoon, and we're coming
thing.
up for August 8. I have no idea when I'm putting these podcasts out, so but, we're in
Yeah,
August currently. But so how did you feel that moon? Did you
I do. It
How
varies
was
now.
it for you?
It varies. Um, and I still track the dates of the full moon and the new moon. I always put
Yeah.
them in my diary. Um,
Mm,
and sometimes I forget that we're heading toward it's particularly the full moon, and I
mm.
will start to get quite agitated and then think, okay,
Interesting.
look where we're heading. Those
'Cause
kind of
that's the one
3 or 4
that
days.
shines a light on everything, isn't it? And it's like, what do you
Yeah,
wanna release? Like, we're showing it to you in that full moon. Like, I've got that right, haven't I? And then the dark moon is for planting the seeds of what you wanna
yes, the
manifest.
new moon.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So I did a lot of
Elizabeth
work
Brew, who
on
I
that.
talk about, has a few, meditations around the moon that are absolutely beautiful,
Yes,
which when
yeah.
I'm being really good, I do. Too busy writing. Got
And
2
then I
books to get out of my body.
went down the mindfulness route,
Yeah.
2016, 2017, something like that. And I did mindfulness-based stress release, which is the 8-week course. And then
Mm,
a couple of years later, I did mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. They didn't really help me. But
interesting.
in the MBCT training, there was
Mm.
some inclusion of mindfulness self-compassion. And
Mm.
just those 2 words, self-compassion, really
Compassion.
spoke to me. And I gradually woke up to the need to be kind to myself. You
Yeah.
read these words about gratitude and be kind to yourself, or I did, over and over, and
Didn't
never
get it.
really thought that they applied to me. And then I did the self-compassion training twice because
Yeah.
it was so powerful.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it is just that. Oh, I mean, it's such a release, isn't it? You do something wrong, and instead of beating yourself up, you're like curious about it. Like, oh, what did I do that created that? And what could I do different? And it's just it's like talking to you like you wish you'd been spoken to as a child, isn't it? That gentle, kind curiosity. And
Yes.
just, it's okay. We'll get through. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like you, very hard to get to that place, but oh, thank goodness I did.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
ability to just be. And I actually really grossly tell a vomit story, but I was sick from erythromycin when I was a child, and my mother screamed at me because I didn't make it to the toilet. And then every time I would be sick after that, I would be like hysterically sobbing, like ridiculously upset. And that's often a sign, isn't it, that there's been a trauma.
Mhm.
And it was actually, I was sitting on the back of a boat in Galapagos, of all places, feeling seasick, going, oh no, I'm going to be the one, I'm going to be sick. And then got stupidly upset. And then I was looking around me going, but nobody else is upset. Everyone's like being really kind, and they've, wrapped you up, and they're taking care of you. So what's going on? And that's when I had to really pull that out and really get curious and kind with myself, and then let it go. I Ho'oponopono'd it away. I actually said that correctly. That's really rare. Um,
Yes. Um,
but it's that. it's getting to that point, isn't it? It's such a journey, particularly from childhood trauma, to get to that self-compassion. So how
Yes.
about now? We're in 2023.
Mhm.
How is it now? Are you still kind and compassionate with yourself, or what makes you remember to do that? Or
Mm, yes. The self
I'm not letting anyone off the hook here.
that that is an ongoing piece of work.
Isn't it? Yep, because
So
we're humans.
and I've been on the planet a long time. So, I literally decades. I'm 62,
Mm,
so I
mm,
have had decades of
yeah.
um, particular beliefs about myself that
Mm,
are not true. And I can remember doing some personal development work 7 or 8 years ago.
mm,
I'll just give them a shout out. There's an organisation called Celebration of Being, and
oh,
they don't be put off by it being called a goddess workshop. Um,
oh, I
but
love the
they run a
goddesses, though.
workshop for women,
Yeah.
and it's very much based on systemic constellations work. And following that weekend, I felt such a shift in me that
Mm.
a voice in my head had gone, and that very bullying voice was the voice of my mother, and she'd gone. So that I
Yeah.
think was 2015.
Yeah.
And so as each year has passed by in the last 10 years,
Yeah.
there have been shifts within me. And now in 2023, I'm the most content I've ever been in my life.
Yeah. Do you feel light? There's a
Um,
lightness, isn't there? There's that
yes,
lightness, that
yeah,
like there's an ease about life, which probably should have always been there. But
yes,
again, I think it's like the self-compassion has to go in the length of time, like the forgiving yourself that you repeated almost like a broken record, the words over and over.
yes,
Hence this is like the podcast is beyond. So it's for people who've done the work and got beyond the damage. But the book is about the initial damage and what I've done. Because it's just we replay
yeah, we
our little
do.
inner critic. Just it's like I could hear my mum here, and then I
Yes,
couldn't hear her anymore. It went.
yeah,
And I don't actually know when. I love that you had a real moment of knowing, but mine at some point went, and it was
yeah.
just so good. Life is just great after that, you
It
know.
was very noticeable. It
Mm,
was, it's like, gosh, this voice has gone. I don't know who it was. It was actually the facilitator
yeah.
said it's your mother. So it's like, and then it was like, is she going to come back?
Nope.
Is this temporary? And it's like, no,
Nope.
no,
Nope. Gone. But
no,
it does actually no, it doesn't. I can't. Yeah, mine must be. I don't even know how long. She certainly hasn't come back. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still be moments where I'll say stupid things to myself, but they're not like There's not the energy behind the words.
no.
Is it the vibration in your case, especially that because you feel
Yeah,
that so much?
yeah, and the kind of the
Amazing.
angst and, yeah, it was bullying really and self-bullying, but, carrying her stuff really, I look back at her
Carrying her
now.
stuff. Oh my
Yeah, she
gosh.
had her own trauma, and I feel much more compassion for her,
Hmm.
and so we reconciled 3 months before she died. My sister sent me a message to say that mum was very unwell and she was
Mm,
diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
mhm,
Uh, and I was in the middle of a work contract, which I ended.
mm,
And I'm extraordinarily grateful that I was able to spend that time with her before she died.
mm,
And I can remember seeing her for the first time in 8 years and
mm.
thinking, my God, you're so small.
Yeah.
Because although physically I'm taller than her, she was a kind of
Mm,
5'2" petite woman, and I'm five
mm.
foot seven, and I'm not petite. But she was always this huge personality,
Ogre,
huge
almost.
energy that
Yeah.
filled a room, and I was terrified of her. So
Mm,
returning into her house to see her again
mm.
was very, very scary, and I had
Yes.
no idea what reception I was gonna get. And I just thought, my God, you're so small. Why
It's
was I
amazing.
so frightened of you?
Yeah.
Uh,
But
Amazing.
I know what you mean. The narcissist's energy. Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, I'm glad you had that. I haven't felt like I need or want that. I did see her after my father passed for 20 whole minutes, which were very weird 20 minutes. But I haven't. I'm glad you've had that closure. I think where I find it the most upsetting is when other people sort of put their judgments on us who've chosen. We've chosen to be out of the destruction path. And there's a lot of people out there who'll be like, but they're your mum. Yeah, but you wouldn't say the same if it was my husband or a sibling or, someone else, a colleague abusing me the same way. So why is it acceptable? So I'm
yes.
glad you got to that point where you
Yeah.
were able, and I think that compassion is so important. Getting
Yeah.
to that point where you feel compassion for your abuser. You don't,
Yeah.
because then you can forgive them and let it go, and you're no longer carrying their energy, your energy. It's just gone.
Yes.
I'm so proud of you. It's hard. I know where you've come from. It's like, oh, but
Yeah.
it's funny because we're like, there's also this thing where in some ways it'd be great to have a quick process, and in some ways it doesn't matter if it takes 2 decades. In my case, it's taken 12 years. It doesn't matter.
No.
I feel like I'll always be doing some kind of work because I'm sure there'll always be something bubbling up where I'm like, oh, got triggered over something. What's that about? Let's heal that and let that go. And
Yes.
because there's just
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. What would you say to anybody who's like hesitating, where they realize that they need help?
Mm.
What would you say before they go to burnout route?
Mm. Well, I'd say listen to yourself, really, because at some level we know.
Mm,
I was consumed with busyness.
yeah,
I was busy, busy, busy,
numbing
which
with busyness.
numbs and makes it very hard to hear the inner voice, to hear the heart speaking or to hear the soul
Yeah,
speaking.
which is the quiet one saying you need help, isn't it? Not this loud inner critic. It's
Yes.
that little.
Yeah. And, uh, to kind of follow the threads as well. This thing about Fee and her meditative art,
Mm,
so much came from that, uh,
yeah,
in a
a whole
very,
business.
very unique moment. But yes, the whole business, the whole other
And
life come from
isn't
it.
that where you're heading shortly? Off to
I
see a
am.
gallery space.
Because I moved to Eastbourne 4 years ago with the intention of
It's
an art
beautiful.
studio by the sea. Then we had a pandemic. So I got the sea, but I
Yeah,
don't have an art studio. I still work off a table in my kitchen, but,
it's a
I had a
fabulous table
look.
though.
It is a table, produces amazing stuff. But,
It does.
and, yeah, I had a look on, Rightmove last week, and I thought, "Ooh, that's an
Oh.
interesting little space," so I'm going to go and have a
Oh,
look.
I'm so excited. I'm so coming for the opening. I'm just inviting myself to your new
You'll
studio.
be most welcome.
Oh god,
And
the trouble is I'll leave with more art and I'm running out of walls. Gotta stop doing that. Every time I'm like, "Oh, I'm literally running out of walls." I'll have to start swapping the art round, and having a gallery or something.
yeah,
Oh, Lynn, you are absolutely amazing. What's the easiest if people want to get in touch with you? What's your preference if they want to reach out and say, "Gosh, one, I want to know more about your art and your
yeah,
story or
well,
whatever."
my website for my art is, sacredintuitiveart.com.
Oh, I love it.
You'll find me there. You can reach me through that website, and you can also reach me through Instagram, where my handle is the same. It's Sacred Intuitive Art.
Perfect. And obviously mention that you heard Lynn here. I always think it's nice to know rather than a random person messages you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your brutal honesty and rawness. I'm just so incredibly humbled. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Well, thanks for asking, Katrina.
Oh, of course. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Damage of Words. How brave, how vulnerable, all to inspire listeners like you to take a step or inspire others to take a step. Imagine what healing we could create if we normalize this conversation. So please pass this on and of course subscribe so we can do just that. Until next time, thank you.